21. Touchdown in turmoil. As I settled into my window seat for the long haul back to South Africa, I gazed out the small oval-shaped window beside me. Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam's bustling international hub, unfolded before my eyes like a miniature landscape, its neat rows of buildings and runways a distant blur. The confined view, framed by the plane's curved wall, seemed to mock my fragile state. Nausea and numbness gripped me, while naked fear seized my body, its icy fingers wrapping around my heart. The night before my departure, Esther Marie and I had clashed. While our time together had been filled with laughter and connection, there were moments that still lingered, unsettling me. Definitive instances where she'd snapped at me unprovoked. Her impatience and sharp words cutting deeper than I cared to admit. I had expressed my hurt, hoping for understanding, but the conversation took a painful turn. My own words, born of frustration and concern, still haunted me. "You're in danger of becoming as hard-hearted as Daddy." As I reflected on our argument, the weight of those words now accompanied me as I gazed out the window. As the plane taxied down the runway, emotions engulfed me. Tears streamed down my face, mirroring the shattered landscape of my family. Frustration, desperation, and anger boiled over, fueled by the devastating truth: I am powerless to repair the rifts. My heart racing, silent screams echoed through my mind, a desperate cry for a lost love, a broken family. When the plane banked and circled, gaining altitude and stabilizing en route, I knew it was inevitable. There was no escape for me. I had to face my life back home and the weight of my own failures. My thoughts winged their way to Esther Marie's life in the Netherlands, where intuitively I knew she had sought refuge. The previous year's devastating trauma had left its mark. Henny's delusional decline and catastrophic mental collapse had ravaged her, leaving festering wounds that were painfully obvious to me. Despite our complicated history, I recalled how, in the Netherlands, she forged a fragile resilience, masking her unhealed trauma behind a veneer of strength and intellect. Our 2-week vacation together revealed glimpses of the carefree spirit I once knew. We cycled through quaint Dutch villages, the wind whipping our hair, laughter echoing through the streets. We explored Amsterdam's charming canals, visited the infamous red light district, and savoured Dutch signature dishes like bitterballen, stroopwafels, and poffertjies. I even indulged in a space cake, much to her surprise. We're still waiting for it to have any comical effect on me, though. My infectious amusement at the quirky Dutch words with their unintended Afrikaans connotations had her giggling uncontrollably beside me. "Oh, Mom, you're so funny," she'd say, shaking her head. In the silence, I ached to weave together the threads of our hearts, Esther Marie's and mine, through the profound bond of blood and heritage. I longed to experience the depth of a biological mother-daughter connection, a mystery I'd never known. My beautiful relationship with my mom, though loving, was built on adoption, not shared bloodlines. I yearned to forge an unbreakable tie, one rooted in our shared DNA. With every fibre of my being, I hungered to bridge the gap, to create a sanctuary of intimacy, trust, and unconditional love. But the void of my own childhood, marked by my birth mother's absence, left me without a blueprint. I had only my deepest desires and the longing to craft something more, something authentic, something true. Yet, as I gazed at Esther Marie, I couldn't shake off the awareness that our reality was more complicated than my ideals. The weight of unmet expectation, of unspoken hurts, hung between us like an unbridgeable chasm. Beyond the laughter and carefree moments, a painful truth lingered. I knew she felt I'd failed her, that I hadn't been the rock she needed during Henny's downfall, and even before that, notably since her teenage years. I felt the crushing weight of her unspoken expectation, that I should have done more, that I should have been stronger. The pain of failing her, of failing to protect her, still lingered, a festering wound that mirrored her own. Her decision to spend a gap year as an au pair in a foreign country far removed from the pain seemed to me a quiet escape. One that I couldn't help but feel was also an escape from me. Our escapade to Italy was a welcome respite and a sensory odyssey. From Rome's ancient grandeur to Cinque Terre's colourful villages, we immersed ourselves in La Dolce Vita. We savoured Prosecco, indulged in pasta and gelato, and marvelled at iconic landmarks. The Colosseum, Juliet's balcony, and the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Venice's winding canals and majestic piazzas enchanted us, complete with a leisurely gondola ride. The speedboat trip on Lake Garda, Italy's largest lake, was exhilarating. In Florence, Renaissance masterpieces awaited. I counted on Italy's passionate heart to fuel a renewed bond with my daughter. Laughter and camaraderie filled the air on our luxury tour bus, where fellow travellers became fast friends, bonding over unforgettable experiences. We had just finished a wine tasting and pairing session at a picturesque vineyard, indulging in Italy's renowned Chianti and Brunello, near the medieval town of San Gimignano. This walled hilltop town is famously known as the Town of Fine Towers, boasting 14 medieval tower houses that still stand. Esther Marie and I were tipsy and giggly, and the vibe on the bus was rowdy and loud as everyone stumbled back on board, all similarly tipsy and giddy from the unforgettable experience. Sinking into our seats, feeling delightfully fuzzy, Esther Marie suddenly gasped, her eyes wide with horror. "Oh, Mom, look! Where's your stone?" My wine-soaked brain slowed to a crawl as I slowly turned to gaze down at my left hand. The familiar weight of my wedding band, now eerily light. The blue topaz stone had vanished. In its place, an empty hole stared back, mirroring the lovelessness of my 22-year marriage. Robotically, I joined Esther Marie as she frantically searched our seats, the floor, and our belongings. Our friends rallied around us, joining the desperate search. The men gallantly dropped to their hands and knees, scouring every inch of the bus floor for any sign of the missing stone. But it remained elusive, nowhere to be found. And in that moment, I knew they wouldn't find it. I knew it was a sign, a message from divinity. A profound peace and calm enveloped me, wrapping me like a gentle blanket, despite the scorching summer heat outside. And indeed, we never did find my topaz stone. As the bus started moving again, everyone settled down, and I lost myself in the rolling vine valleys of Tuscany. I pondered the passionate Italian culture and how it resonated deeply within me. Oh my God, do I perhaps have Italian blood in me? I smiled wryly at the persistent little girl inside me, who still revelled in fantasies and the implausible. She remained insatiable, refusing to leave me be. The curious thoughts about the disappearing stone lingered. I eagerly anticipated my next visit to Christie, wondering what insights she would share about this enigmatic event. And what would she say about my feet? Oh, my poor feet. I'd never fared well with flying, plagued by fluid retention. After returning from Los Angeles in 2000, where I qualified for a brief, all-expenses-paid network marketing extravaganza, I couldn't wear shoes for a week. Italy's tour began with a painful precedent: swollen feet, courtesy of the Vatican's scorching heat on day one. Neither propping my feet against our bedroom wall, nor resting them, unladylike, on the headrest in front of me brought relief. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and spotlighted. Everyone stared, their gazes lingering on my feet, their sympathy palpable. The unwelcome, familiar friend from my past, shame, still lingered, whispering that I should be ashamed of letting my feet get into this state. Our tour guide flung around words like elephant feet, claiming she'd never seen swelling like mine in all her years as a guide. Each morning, our bus friend's sympathetic greetings came with a telling glance. "Good morning, Elmarie. How are you today?" Their eyes drifting down to my feet, not my face. I'd reply jokingly, "I'm fine. Please look up. I'm up here," pointing to my eyes and face. The chuckles and laughter masked a deep unease. Was I carrying dead weight, literally and figuratively? Were my swollen ankles a manifestation of the emotional burdens I'd shouldered for so long? The sting of Henny's words, which had burdened me for years, now seemed to swell to alarming proportions. The severity of my condition wasn't lost on me. I knew that unchecked, fluid retention could lead to blood clots or even organ damage. I took drastic measures in the Netherlands. I invested in tight compression socks and purchased expensive tablets, hoping to mitigate the swelling. 5 weeks prior, a persistent urinary tract infection had threatened to cancel my trip. My body seemed to be warning me of something my mind refused to acknowledge. By the time I landed in George, the closest airport to Oudtshoorn, the nausea had subsided, leaving only the hollow emptiness that echoed through my soul like a mournful sigh. Each step down the plane stairs echoed my reluctance to return, my painfully swollen feet a tangible reminder of my weariness. Henny's forlorn expression greeted me, and I felt like the one and only little lamb perpetually led to slaughter, trapped in an endless cycle of submission and suffering. The ubiquitous, toxic dynamic between us, a suffocating, repetitive pattern of attraction and repulsion, closed in around me, its grip tightening like a noose. Yet, amidst the darkness, the sacred voice inside me gently whispered, "Surely this needn't be so?" A glimmer of hope, an invitation that I held the power to break free.